There is no game quite like Diablo 2. Not Path of Exile, not Last Epoch, and certainly not Diablo 3 or 4. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy all of those games. I love Path of Exile, clocking in over 2,000 hours, and have hundreds of hours in the others. They are great ARPGs, but they don't quite capture the same kind of magic that keeps me coming back to Diablo 2. Modern ARPGs are faster, they look better, they have more endgame content than ever before. But somewhere along the way, they lost some of that old school magic Diablo 2 captured 20 years ago. Not complexity, not necessarily depth, but a slower, more immersive approach to ARPGs, driven by deliberate friction, a restrained power curve, and a uniquely thoughtful loot system. So here's why, despite everything that's come since, no ARPG has truly replaced Diablo 2, at least for me. In Diablo 2, there are many old school elements that, in the moment, can feel clumsy. Small inventory space, identifying every item, stamina for running, limited skill respects, the list goes on. Newer games have treated these as quality of life problems to be solved, which I do understand why. Getting rid of those annoying bumps leads to a smoother experience and will feel more comfortable to many gamers. However, I think it's these points of friction that give Diablo 2 more memorable moments and a heightened sense of immersion over its competition. For instance, small inventory space makes sense from an immersion standpoint because, well, it makes no sense for someone to be carrying 30 pieces of armor. It also creates strategic decisions about what to pick up and what to leave behind because you can't have it all. That choice makes loot feel tangible, like physical objects in the world, not just numbers waiting to be filtered out later. Identifying items too also creates more drama to the loot experience. Diablo 4 and Last Epoch have made items already identified from the moment they drop. You know their value the moment it hits the ground. In Diablo 2 though, identification creates two layers of excitement. One, when the rare piece of loot hits the ground, and two, identifying it to find out what the unique actually is or what the roles are. It sounds like a small extra step because it is, but that small extra delay adds tension that makes item drops even more exciting. It also helps that Diablo 2 has significantly less loot in terms of sheer volume than Diablo 4 or Last Epoch, making the identifying system manageable, which would get annoying in D4 where it rains items everywhere. Even stamina, often cited as one of Diablo 2's most dated systems, serves a purpose. Early on, it forces you to move deliberately. You're not a god yet, actually quite weak. You're vulnerable, underpowered, and have to purposely move around enemies in a way that doesn't get you trapped. It accentuates the feeling of weakness in the early game. Building up gear and your strength stat to eventually make stamina irrelevant though is then another axis of growth, adding to the gradual power fantasy. And then there is perhaps the most contentious point of friction, the limited skill respecs. I see why modern games have trended towards giving out infinite respecs. Breaking a character by making wrong build decisions feels bad, and not having an undo button discourages build experimentation. But it also feels diegetically off. Being able to change a character's skill points at any time feels misaligned with in-game lore, but more importantly, dilutes character identity. If your character can change builds at any moment, each build feels less meaningful since they are to some degree disposable. On the flip side, when skill points are more permanent, choices matter. Builds become something you commit to. That commitment creates anxiety, but it also creates identity. Your character becomes truly yours, shaped by decisions you can't simply undo. It can be more frustrating to get stuck for sure, but I personally like the heightened sense of ownership of my character shaped by commitment. Which approach is better? That's going to come down to taste, and I think both kinds of systems can exist in the genre to cater to different players. But what's for certain is that Diablo 2's friction isn't there to waste your time, it's there to give your actions some weight. Maybe I'm old school in that way, but it works great for me. The modern ARPG has gotten fast. Like really fast. PoE has you clearing screens of monsters at a time. D4 and Last Epoch also smashing waves of monsters as early as midway through the campaign. Nothing wrong with this style of gameplay, clearly a lot of players like it, myself included, but it is distinctly different from the slower, more methodical gameplay of Diablo 2, and this is thanks to a more gradual power curve. What I mean by power curve is the relative strength of the player to the monsters. Compared to the more modern games, Diablo 2 keeps player power quite low relative to the monsters until very late into endgame. Why this is interesting is that while D2's gameplay is overall slower, it allows the player to engage with monster mechanics more meaningfully. If the player is so strong that they kill screens of monsters instantly, well obviously the monsters die before you get affected by their attacks, movements, and other qualities. To compensate for fast clear speed, the devs have to artificially ramp up the monsters' numbers to deal spiky one-shot level damage as well, making for one-shot or get one-shotted gameplay that you sometimes see in PoE. In D2 though, you often need multiple hits to even take down simple normal enemies. You can't just vaporize a whole group of them and need to respect how dangerous they can be. like getting swarmed by the dolls or getting cornered by these archers. It's for the very reason that you can't kill monsters instantly that allows you to have strategic fights with them. You need to pay attention to their attack patterns, their movements, and tactically move around the environment to pick your fights carefully. What this means is that I don't get those glorious dopamine explosions, but I get to have more meaningful interactions with the enemies. The slower paced combat also means that you actually have to use the environment to your advantage. Since getting surrounded is a death sentence, you're incentivized to kite enemies around the environment to take them slowly or funnel them through choke points. Most modern ARPGs have you jumping head on into a pack of mobs and blow them up, so D2 actually feels quite unique in comparison, having you respect the monsters, your positioning, and the surroundings. This style is not for everyone, but this more methodical flow to gameplay isn't well served in the genre, so it is one of the reasons D2 continues to remain relevant to this day. That's not to say that Diablo 2 doesn't have that power fantasy, god mode feeling gameplay. Some builds absolutely dominate hell difficulty when you push your gear deep into the endgame. Javazon, Hammerden, Sork builds, the controversial Mosaic Assassin do also end up at the screen clearing gameplay more similar to modern titles. It just takes longer to get there. Reaching that level of power is the reward of the grind, not the journey itself. Starting out so vulnerable to eventually becoming that OP character after dozens of hours of grind makes each step towards that goal feel more impactful. That god mode level of power experienced in gameplay is something that is earned, not the default combat loop. And I think a lot more recent games catering to more immediate rewards miss out on this. Like, let's take a quick look at Diablo 4. Sure, your character continues to get more powerful in the sense that your damage numbers keep going up, but gameplay wise you're still clearing screens of monsters easily right away from the early game. In that sense, not much in terms of gameplay changes because you're still blasting packs of monsters the whole way through, just with bigger numbers. You're not really feeling much of a change through the gameplay. In Diablo 2, there's a more immersive journey, whacking monsters one at a time slowly at the start of the game to finally obliterating packs only deep into endgame that is experienced through the gameplay itself. It's delayed gratification and something that isn't as present in more recent titles. Path of Exile 2 campaign does come close though. But the beating heart of any ARPG is the loot, and Diablo 2's itemization, while not perfect for sure, is one of the genre's best. In many other games with loot, it's common to see higher rarity tiers be categorically better than lower rarities. It works for simpler itemization systems, but the path to upgrading becomes quite linear. Just pick the rare item with the stats you need. On the other hand, Diablo 2 has useful items from all rarity tiers. For example, basic white items aren't garbage. They instead have potential to become some of the best items in the game thanks to rune words and socketing. Rune words give purpose to plain socketed bases. A white monarch shield might seem unassuming on the ground, but if it rolls 4 sockets, perfect for the powerful spirit rune word. That white phase blade, with 5 sockets, is perfect for the most powerful melee rune word in the game, grief. There is excitement not from what the item is, but from what it could become, which is again, another layer of anticipation and buildup that makes the grind more addicting. Certain good rare yellows can also outperform the sparkly unique items as well, encouraging the player to really compare and understand the stats each piece of gear brings. Even some blue items can have insane rolls that make them best in slot for certain builds. With so many different kinds of items having potential to be useful, it helps that the drop rates are also on the lower side as far as ARPGs go. You might think that less loot is less fun, but a few hours of sorting through Diablo 4's overwhelming amount of loot drops makes it apparent that there's a sweet middle ground somewhere. Diablo 2 feels refreshing in how you're not filtering out 99% of what hits the ground. It's not overwhelming visually, but more importantly, the scarcity of items makes the actual good items feel absolutely amazing when they finally do drop. Yes, one of D2's defining points to its itemization is that the most coveted items are brutally rare. I'm talking about your Shakos, your High Runes, Arachnid's Mesh, Stone of Jordans, Tyrael's Might. Diablo 2 is balanced so that none of these ultra rare items are actually required to beat the game. You can finish Hell without even seeing a High Rune or a Chase Unique, but when one does drop, it's a moment. That level of rarity creates memory, and just knowing that there's always a chance, no matter how small, to find something incredible makes every run feel meaningful. Diablo 4's developers had this idea in mind, but took it too far with their ultra rare uber uniques. Those drops weren't just rare, they were effectively unobtainable, crossing the line from exciting to irrelevant. Diablo 2 by contrast trickles in just enough high impact drops to keep you hooked. Even after countless playthroughs, I still find items I've never seen before, and that sense of discovery keeps an otherwise repetitive grind feeling fresh. One last point for the itemization I want to mention is that Diablo 2 avoids excessive multiplicative damage scaling. Unlike D4, there aren't 10 layers of percentage bonuses all feeding into one exploding number. Stats are flatter. There's more additive damage instead. Increases are readable. What this means is many more items are viable in comparison with one another and don't get obsolete fast. Like, take the Skin of the Viper Magi body armor for example. It's kind of a mid-game armor, but has solid resistances and plus skills, making it more than usable in completing the game. There are other body armors that offer more resistances or different defensive benefits, but many are in comparable range and don't outperform it categorically except the insane high-end stuff. You instead have to carefully assess the pros and cons to these different gear pieces when deciding whether to swap or not. Some people might enjoy the D4 approach of upgrading your gear constantly, but I found that in that system, each piece of gear kind of felt meaningless since you're just going to replace it within the hour. I prefer how the band of viability of different items in D2 is smaller, allowing for more tactical gearing choices. Regardless of your preference to itemization, this approach is distinctly D2 and not many other games quite replicate it to the same extent. And for me, those are the three pillars that still allow Diablo 2 to stand apart in the ARPG space, even more than 2 decades later. Plenty of games have promised to be its spiritual successor, and many of them are excellent in their own right, but none have quite captured the same magic for me. Yes, Diablo 2 has clunky old school systems, but those systems exist in service of immersion. Its slower power progression trades constant dopamine spikes for more deliberate tactical gameplay, and its loot system remains one of the best in the genre has ever seen, holding up remarkably well even today. Modern ARPGs have largely moved towards faster, flashier experiences, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm glad D2 is still around to offer something different. Maybe one day a game will truly carry that same magic forward. Until then, Diablo 2 is still here to stay and it's still worth playing.